My name is Maha Visnu, co-chair of the Boston Green Rainbow Party. I have questions. First I should say I'm impressed. Really I am. I started with the Massachusetts Green Party about 3 years ago. Enjoy it, absolutely. But just what you all are doing here, the people who have shown up for the meeting is impressive. And I visit chapters of the GRP in Massachusetts, and this is a crowd. This is standing room only. I'm used to attending chapter meetings where there's myself and 2 of the others. Not that the desire isn't there, so they're doing the best that they can, but this is very, very inspiring. I've got some questions because I want to take some of this energy back to Massachusetts and share it. So first of all, thank you. Thank you for having me, and I would like to come again next month if I'm allowed to, if it's appropriate.
Sure.
Because this is fantastic. This is really, you guys got to cherish it, because the next state over, we have work to do. So you guys you're a wonderful example. Some questions. May I record the answers because I can, if you're comfortable with that? If not, that's okay. Oh, you're recording it? Send me a copy of that, okay?
I'll post it on YouTube.
Excellent, excellent. I'm not trying, I just want to make sure I get the information.
Yes.
You were talking about how running for office does wonders for growing the party. In Massachusetts, we're having lively discussions about how should we focus more on running for office, or should we focus not one or the other, but should our emphasis be on running for positions for office, or should it be more activism, protesting, being on the line of fire, things like that? And what's the proper balance that you would think? I'm asking you, but everyone, please chime in, because I want to hear it.
Yes. Well, my answer is it's not either or, it's both and, right? But the main thing, I think, is you don't do your activism from your couch at home on Facebook. You get out and you interact with people. Whether it's activism or whether it's running for office. It's nice to, Facebook is useful for some things. I personally hate Facebook because the level of dialogue is so poor. It encourages toxicity. And it also encourages kind of this tribalism, where we don't talk to anybody whose opinion is different than ours. And I think if we want to build a mass movement, that is an essential no-no. You talk to people to convince them to join you, and that's what a mass movement is about. So I would say, first of all, running for office, you get out there and you go door to door, or you canvass, or you show up at meetings, or you go on the town green and you speak to people, not just to your own, preaching to your choir. And we did it in our campaign. It was amazing to go to our town green, to the farmers market. That's what we did. We didn't have enough resources and time to go door to door. That's in the future. I would like to do that, but I know the Waterford Greens have done that. They built their presence on their town council and won so many offices in Waterford. They're not here tonight, by going door to door, and that's our plans. And I know the Clinton Greens are doing that Eric has been involved in the high school, as you heard, and he's involved in the Charter Commission, and he's involved. So you really have to be there and meet people where they are. And that's the way you convince also Democrats or even Republicans or independents to think differently and respect what we bring to the table. And I think it also it applies to activism. So we were at the New Haven rally on Friday last, and we had from Doug, our environmental wisdom sign there, and we put it up. I was looking to see, I think it's in some of the, the TV news, but to have the vote green environmental wisdom, to show up at things like that is so important.
You remind me of, I have a father. I want others to address this as well. But that you read something about 3 things to do.
Oh, yeah.
What was that?
I know, it's actually
Strong towns. Strong towns.
Probably Strong Towns. There is a group called Strong Towns. It's run by a former city planner, I think a Republican from the Midwest, and he tries to figure out what makes cities vibrant. And he does not go in for, let's just get a big taxpayer like Pfizer that makes money manufacturing drugs, or Electric Boat that we just now have that makes nuclear submarines, but really have a sound economy based on like what people need. And I can send you the link. It's a yeah, and I don't remember where I heard that quote about, but they're all about incremental change. Take a small bite where you can and take a baby step forward, and then when you're finished, take another baby step forward, another baby step forward. Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about,
Can I just add one more thing? I know I speak in like kind of high level generalisms to talk about in detail how it worked actually for us. I was at our town green for farmers market, but I talked to hundreds of people.
because I got something coming.
Oh, okay, and then I rebounded that into town hearings on a school that was going to be sold off to
I
developers.
want to hear the details, but I've got a request of all of you, which I'll make before I leave here. But I want, another part of this question is, again, this wonderful discussion we're having in Massachusetts, is we want to run candidates for office. And what if we don't have, first of all, what is a good candidate? And if we don't have a good candidate, should we run a candidate anyway? And should we also be afraid of causing more harm than good? So let's talk to that a little bit, please.
Speaking as somebody who may not be a good candidate, no. But I think
So humble.
I think the local Green Party in New London has done a good job in that, you know, like we're reaching for the brass ring right now by running somebody for mayor. But we do have, you know, people who are in visible positions, you know, within our local government already, you know. And so, you know, Mar on the stormwater and Chris on PCRC and, you know, Bob and his many commissions and many task forces. And so then there's this idea that we can both kind of scale up from there and be relating to people who will also eventually, you know, see themselves, you know, kind of at the city council or school board or mayor level. And I think that there is this kind of ladder that we've created where these sorts of positions are attainable, and not just attainable, but that there's kind of the local knowledge and kind of granular understanding of who does what and who's good at what. That, you know, taking somebody like Charmaine, for example, who, you know, doesn't have, or myself, we don't have long track records of commission work and that kind of stuff, but we have a lot of people who we can go ask questions of, and a lot of people who can school us in all of this. And I feel really supported in being able to ask every single question and ask it of lots of different people and be kind of not corrected or like given the party line on things, but kind of nudged in a particular direction. And I guess the last thing I'll say is, like, I definitely kind of toggle back and forth between like wanting to be really like visionary and out there and electable, you know, and kind of those two poles. And
Like Joe Biden?
and be challenged to kind of think that can all be, that those don't have to be polarities, right? That kind of thinking big and saying things like, like our local economy shouldn't be based on this one single company that makes nuclear submarines, and there should be a process by which those many workers figure out something, you know, more useful to do with the incredible knowledge and the incredible skills that they have. Like that's kind of a big thing to say in a community that's so dependent on the military-industrial complex, and it might sort of be alienating, and yet I think there's a way to say it in an invitational and sort of visionary kind of way that can still be sort of electable, you know? So.
What I like about what's, I saw some hands go, But what I like about what I see here, what you all have here much larger than what we have in Boston or in Massachusetts. So our lively discussions, because we're so few of us, they're not an issue because there's so few of us. When we grow, these differences of opinion can become large fractures. And I like seeing the fact that you seem to, from what I hear, you seem to have, as a group, accepted that we can have these visionary moonshot ideas, yet at the same time, you're in the weeds, getting the 1 to 2 steps things done. I really, really like that. Cherish it, because there are other possibilities. My follow-up question to that is, what recommendations you can give, I could take back to Massachusetts, that when we have people who really think, no, what we're talking about, for a practical example, we're talking about the platform, the policy on the military-industrial complex. So we have one group of people who say, abolish the Department of Defense, just nuke it. Well, no pun intended.
Give it the death penalty?
And others say, no, it's got to be like this. We have obligations to NATO and this and that and the other. So my question is, how would, as a state, as a party platform, how would we address these two extremes so that we can function as a party and have a slate of candidates running on various levels of government? All right, hands are going up. Can we just take it in order? I'll start with people who haven't spoken, with Michelle, and we'll go this way.
It's interesting because in my line of work, I'm a clinical social worker by trade. It's not only my profession, it's my life. One of the things I teach that is inspired by Buddhist thought is to follow the middle path. The middle path is not necessarily literally the path that goes through the middle, but the opportunity to explore that it does not have to be either or. It can be and. There's a possibility to be able to secure our borders, fulfill our obligations to other world powers, as well as not overinvest in militaristic exercises in other sides of the world, or destabilize other countries for our own personal livelihoods. So I think it's very possible to do both, where we have an understanding that yes, security is important to us all, as the continental United States and our assorted colonies, but it's also even more important are the people that we are attempting to secure, which means those families on the ground that have to live, day by day, trying to figure out, how to keep food on the table as well as keep their kids in school. So when we move away from binaries, I think we have we have opportunities to grow. When we get, stuck in the rut of binaries, we let other parties try to define and pigeonhole what we should do, right? What I also wanted to add from what you spoke about earlier in terms of finding people to run for office, again, it's a situation with a middle path. I think it's possible to also be very active in the community where other organizations who have been doing the work for centuries even are present, because they need to see your face. They need to see that you're invested, not just there for a photo op. Right? And I think it's also possible in the same vein to find people who are passionate for justice. All types of justice, ecological justice, human rights, all of that, and say, you know what, you are more than capable to sit in this position of power that has been denied, perhaps, to people like you, whether it's based on your religious or your spiritual belief, or the color of your skin, or how you identify on the gender spectrum. So I think it's also possible to do both. So again, as a clinical social worker, I did not feel that I was in a position to run for office. It was my beloved Roma here who came to me, and it also took me about 4 months as well.
So start early.
Yeah, start early. Who said no, that you're more than, Michelle, you're more than capable to do this. So I had to step out of my comfort saying, you know what, this is for the benefit of the party, but it's also a benefit for the children that I'm seeking to represent, because we borrow the earth from the children. We don't own it. It's the generations that are beyond us that actually have a greater stake than we do living in the present.
You're here.
So I'm happy to serve in any way I possibly can for the party, but again, for the greater good of this country, the survival of this country. So I can only speak for myself as co-chair. in this capacity, but if there's anything that I can do personally to support the work that you're doing, especially as a woman of color, especially as a pansexual woman, especially as a woman with a child, I'm happy to do that. So please call on me if I can be of any service to you.
Yeah, I haven't asked at the end of this. I don't want to use your entire evening. Is there a time?
That's a great thing about having our own office. There is no real, we're not gonna get kicked out. We have,
Well, I have a 2-hour drive, so.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you can go as long as you want.
But I want to get these, this input here.
Yeah.
And then we'll go, there's someone else in the back.
So I'm a new entry to the Green
You know, I might
Party.
say just minutes at a time because,
Yeah,
okay, yes.
right. So maybe there's 2 points I want to make. In Connecticut, the activity that's exciting is coming from small towns. I'm not 100% sure why this is, but in my, you could call it cynical, in my view of I just joined the Greens. I didn't want to be in any political party because I have a somewhat slightly cynical view of parties, but they all develop patronage systems where you rise up in the party by favors that you do for people. Scratch your back, I scratch your back, you know. That's the way I view all political parties, even third parties.
That's also human relationships.
What?
Human relationships.
Yeah. But it's not based on merit, it's not based on, this is what you've accomplished, this is the achievements that you've made. You got this person elected, you brought new people into the party. I don't see that. It's like, you did a favor for me, I do a favor for you. You know? And so that's Democrats and Republicans, but to me, all of them. There's more money in Democrats and Republicans. The money is there, you know, not with Greens. So I come into the Greens with a little bit of that cynicism about parties. But what I see happening in Connecticut is these small towns are doing stuff, you know, regardless of what's happening in the big cities where the politics kind of seems moribund. Now, I don't know how that relates to Massachusetts, but it's the small towns where things are happening, it's making the big cities look bad. You know, but okay, that's fine.
So,
Minutes.
my mother was the only woman in the drafting department, EP, when I was growing up.
That was what?
The only woman in the drafting department in electric boat when I was growing up, and we rented rooms to nuclear-poofs, the nuclear-powered submarine sailors. So by the time I was 7 years old, I was looking at drawings of nuclear-powered submarines spread across the living room floor. And I just loved that picture of Frida, you know, standing in front of the rainbow flag with the peace sign up there. You know, and knowing a little bit about her family and her upbringing. I'm reading a book about her uncle, Daniel, called Pursuing the Spiritual Roots of Activism. In 1961, they had a little gathering with the Merton, Gethsemane, and which was the beginning of the modern day peace movement.
He's got a 2-hour drive.
Get what started, I'll let you know.
About 30 years ago, I was actually working for Nick Carter at the Baptist Church in Beverly, Mass., and he was the co-chair for the National Nuclear Freeze Movement, along with the congressman in that district. And they had flown to Geneva with Bella Abzug and Jesse Jackson and that whole crowd, and they had gathered over 500,000 signatures in 6 months before the days of computers. So it really brings it all together.
I saw a hand, yes, please.
I would say do not be drawn into fear and negativity, and revere examples that are positive, however small or humble. When it comes to the Department of Defense, I don't know if everyone here knows, I'm shocked I didn't know until just recently, but Costa Rica has had no Department of Defense since 1947. And they've made great ecological advances.
Sure. Anybody else? Because I have some, yes, please, and then we'll come here.
Yeah, I think I agree quite a bit with what Michelle was saying about like sort of trying to not get caught into binaries.
when I was laying out a plan for running for Attorney General last year, I definitely was in that space of like, okay, as a lawyer, I know what this system can actually do. I know what it could do tomorrow if somebody had the will to make that happen. And I also know how far that is from where I would like it to be. And a big part of the platform that I put together was based on what's the best achievement that we could make right now if the politicians who were in those positions actually wanted to do it. And there was really a tremendous amount. Like, you know, the one thing I did deliberately was I said, you know, the plain fact of the matter is I'm not going to stake out some territory on war and peace and the Defense Department because the Attorney General of the state of Connecticut has absolutely nothing to do with that. I am going to say, you know, of course, I'm going to talk about the fact that if we spend billions of dollars on defense at the national level, it means that our kids can't go to decent schools. And of course, I'm going to talk about that. But on the issues that were really pertinent to the position, it's two things. One was, you know, what can we do now? And the other was, what do the people who are doing this work all the time around this particular issue, what do they want us to do? So, like, for example, I've spent a lot of time working in the immigrant rights movement, and I always have to tell people I'm not an immigration lawyer. I don't know anything at all about immigration law, but I have worked with folks in the immigrant rights movement for many years. And so I talked to a lot of the folks I worked with, say, you know, what are the most important issues? How should we approach them? What do you want the state of Connecticut to do that it's not doing now? And I'll say this, that, and it's certainly not limited to the Green Party. It's endemic to, you know, it's not just limited to the left, but the left is supposed to take responsibility for the idea that we actually try to listen to what oppressed communities want, and, you know, try to figure out what it is that would help in situations where people are, you know, most limited in the resources that they need to live. We need to do a much better job of listening to the people in those communities. I mean, being an electoral party is a tremendously valuable piece of political property. But I don't believe the Green Party is ever going to be big enough that we in Connecticut, that we are going to be the ones who are the experts on multicultural education or bilingual education in our school systems, or you know, what our policy should be on you know, on border security. There are people who do work on that all the time, day in and day out for years. Those people are the experts. So we need to start listening to them and developing our program based on, hey, you know what? I'm just a facilitator. All I really do is I facilitate. I'm like the transmission belt between what people in the community who are doing this work, what they're doing, and how can I explain that to everybody else who's not involved in that?
I'm going to come back with a question, follow up question, but after you've spoken, and we had another hand raised here. So please. Are we okay for talks? I'm enjoying this too much.
One of the more interesting state Green Party meetings.
Really? Yeah. First, can we as a group thank the people who have already run for office and are currently running for office right now? The round of applause. It's a tremendous sacrifice. And we'd like to thank the people. I work mostly behind the scenes, you know, and doing the actual, you know, campaign strategy and stuff. So I've probably asked, and I'm not kidding about this, I've asked about 500 people in my lifetime to run for office. You know, I consistently ask people. Some of them have names like Ralph Nader, you know, and but let's bring that back, okay? Ralph Nader came from nowhere and, you know, had super rallies of 10,000 people and got 3 million votes out of, you know, creating. Some, like Jill Stein, had experience running on a statewide level and you know, was able to build that kind of, you know, national momentum.
Hold that thought, because before you leave.
Go ahead.
Peter. We'll come back to you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not gonna.
No, you duck out. I just make this request now while I have you. What I started to do in Massachusetts is I'm having regular conference calls, brainstorming sessions. My ask is, inspired by all of you, is that if those of you who would like to come to a conference call, I'll set it up within the next month or so. I would like about 5 or 6 of you, many of those who are running for office as well, and those of you who have experience doing so, to be part of a teleconferencing panel, 5 or 6 of you, and share what we're talking about now, about running, particularly about candidacy, running for office, and how your take on it. And then those who call in Massachusetts, you can ask questions of those of you on the panel. So if you would like to participate, please just
You can sign here.
yes, sign here and I'll get it from there. So any of you, if you would like to be part of that panel, I will set up. I communicate primarily by email, so we'll leave a legible email, and I will get back to you and I'll set up this conference where you all can have a panel of all of you, those of you who want. And then I'll invite the members of the Massachusetts Green Party to come in here, because this is, I'm telling you, I'm growing a third head, just, not that I have 2, but I'm getting excited about this. So,
Science fiction movie.
please, I'm sorry, yes, carry on.
No, it's perfectly fine. I mean, but we also have to know our histories and stuff. We've elected people to city council in Hartford, in a big city, in New Haven, in a big city. We've elected Gene Dismay as was essentially the mayor of Wyndham. All of these things have happened. We've had, and we need to kind of constantly remind ourselves, yeah, these things have happened. So when I say to people, hey, Ralph Nader got almost 3 million votes in 2000, and look what happened. There was a backlash and everything, and even the Greens had to grow from that. It's like, how do you go from getting 3 million people to vote for president to getting more people elected and all that stuff? It's a matter of progress, of making sure, but it's also just a matter of doing the work and saying, okay, it's time to go beyond super big ideas and get into the point of governing, running for office. How do you run Willimantic? How do you run mayor? How do you become mayor of New London and all that sort of stuff with real practical, solutions? And then finally, you recruit candidates, you've got to tell them, we'll stand behind you. We'll give you campaign managers. We'll set up an office. For the longest time, we debated back and forth. And we're even having I can't believe it, on a national level, we don't have a national office for the Green Party. We had that for the longest period of time. We need to start getting to that point where you can go there and you can bring, okay, you've got a national office, great. College kids want to work as an intern there for a couple of semesters or something like that. They can do the grunt work. They can start building up, but you got to have the resources to do that. You got to have, and Ralph Nader said it a long time ago, every state party has to have an office. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut Green parties have to have some place where people can go and share computers and train people and all that sort of stuff. That's not crazy talk.
I want you on that call. Yes.
Just quickly, related to the question you said about, what do we do with these people who say, okay, just abolish all nukes, or how do we work with people? I was just thinking, you coming from different communities of people who came together with great ideals, and then the practicalities sort of falling apart. Because it happened because we didn't start where we were. We were off on what could be what we want, but you also have to remember to start where you are. Stay where you are, start where you are. What can we do given that we have this situation and we're not going to be able to just completely go, it's gone now. Let's be realistic, start where you are. One of the things that I wanted to also say is that you can't villainize people. I've been an environmentalist, working in the environment for many, many years, doing public education, doing lots of different things. And so part of our campaign to stop pollution from, say, cigarette butts or something was to try to address smokers. So you can't just go up and say, you're a smoker, you stop smoking. So what did we do? We had this whole campaign called Smokers for a Clean America. And we passed out these pocket-type, cigarette butt holders. You can't alienate people. They are where they are, start where they are, and then move from there. One of the things I'd like to suggest is that for any government money that goes to a business, especially for military spending, we should, one of the ways to start moving forward to a peacetime economy, because it really bothers me that we're stuck in this wartime economy, and it's getting worse and worse, is to fight to make sure that we demand that a certain percentage of that money has to start being moved towards retraining our engineers and our scientific people and our talented technical people to green energy, to green sustainable technology. So, you know, and starting by just, okay, 20% or 10%, whatever it is, start somewhere and say, 10% of that money, we're demanding you're going to start retraining and moving. And then next, whatever the next period is, raise it. And just like we're doing with our carbon footprint. We're starting small, we're raising it as we go incrementally.
I have on my schedule another one of these conference calls specifically focusing on the military-industrial complex. I want you on that call. I wanted to follow up, just, I know I love it.
I know you're the one with the long drive. So you
but this is the last thing I want to ask. And it's piggyback off what you said. And, no, behind you. I forgot your name. I'm being very rude. Peter. And what you said as well. Yes. In our exciting discussions, there is a line of thinking that we should not work with Democrats or Republicans. We have to do whatever we can to distinguish ourselves from them. And in fact, it's what you said. It reminded me to you as well. You were saying that we are not going to be the dominant party. We want to work with other parties. There is, in Massachusetts, and it's not a bad thing, it's a healthy debate, that no, the other two parties are the devil and the devil incarnate, and the Green Party is the way back home. How do we deal with, or let's talk about that briefly, we don't have a lot of time, but let's talk about it. What is the emphasis? Are we trying to supply, are we trying to actually become the dominant third party? Are we trying to become, if it's always going to be a two-party system, are we going to be that second party and relegate the Republicans to, or the Democrats to something else? Or do we really genuinely want to work with other parties?
May I comment?
So let's start with, we had his hand up first, we'll continue.
So I made some cynical comments before about patronage systems in political parties, that you scratch someone's back and they scratch yours, and that tends the way it works. But on a grassroots level, if you acknowledge that the leaders are mostly corrupt, you should also be receptive to people about issues on a grassroots level, you know. You can say, hey, you know, the people that are leading your party have been bought, essentially, but it doesn't mean that everybody within the party isn't doing good grassroots activism and is involved in, you know, issues. So there always should be an open door, you know. It's not like, hey, you're tainted because you belong to you're a Democrat or Republican, you know. But it's acknowledged that power does corrupt people. You know, it's simple, but it's...
Absolute power corrupts, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, Michelle?
I wanted to definitely add to what Mr. Young just shared. I recall when I was down on the shoreline just visiting a conversation with people who were looking to be elected, and somehow I managed to get on the agenda to be able to speak. Lynn was there, and my son was there, and it was raucous. So this woman came up to me who identified as Democrat, and she was probably about 1.5 inches away from my nose, and had like a threatening kind of stance. And basically said, she's like, I want to take, you know, a devil's advocate position right now. I said, well, the devil doesn't need an advocate. I smiled. The devil doesn't need an advocate. And then, you know, she basically said, well, why don't you just come over to the blue side? Like, what, you know, why don't you become a Democrat? We have the money, we have the resources. Without saying that, you know. And I said, well, I vote by principle, not by party. And she didn't really understand where I was coming from. But she couldn't argue with that either. So, you know, if I meet someone who identifies as a different party because they choose to for whatever reason, and it can be generational respect, it could be a variety of reasons, especially amongst African American Black communities who tend to trend Democratic, you know. It just may be a whole culture attached to that, right? I don't deny or try to invalidate their position. I reinforce my own. And so if we can believe that, you know, there are certain inalienable rights that can be afforded to people regardless of where they come from, you know, if we can have some sort of conversation about what Greens stand for, then I have no problem having, you know, moving further and supporting them even for their candidacy or the work that they're doing in the community outside of party politics. You know, I think we really should take a look at how do we work with people based on, you know, what we stand for, versus just trying to, you know, lock the opportunity to connect because they have different party affiliations than we do. So, but that's all.
Let's end here because I need to. Yes.
You didn't come into this experience because we've had an ongoing and sometimes very painful discussion about cross endorsements, things like that, through this party and stuff. My representative is probably the most progressive. You know, he's for ranked choice voting, he's gay, he's for legalization of cannabis, you know, on and on and on stuff. If you took away the Democratic label, you could stick on a green label and, you know, and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, the whole strategy of should we, you know, should Greens cross endorse a very true progressive, you know, that sort of stuff, you know, and my personal opinion is we have to be very smart about it. We have to be able to work with people, say we disagree about these kinds of things. This whole idea that, you know, even Republicans and stuff, you know, when I grew up, the Republicans were country club Republicans. They were fiscally conservative, but they were pro-choice. They were all sorts of, you know, those were the Republicans in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Okay? You know, that's not Alabama or something, but those were the Republicans and stuff. So, you know, my experience, I call into conservative talk radio all the time and find common ground and stuff with people, you know, that sort of thing. So I think that we, you know, people, especially maybe it's new people, you know, the practical politics of, you know, what can we work on, what can we agree not to, you know, work on with other parties, you know, especially if, you know, oftentimes when it's a dominant, you know, a Democrat, you know, experience here in this town, the Republicans have tried to work with the Greens on issues that they find common ground on, city issues and stuff. So that makes sense. I have to take it, you know, case by case, but, you know, to sit there and go, you know, these people are the devil, blah, 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 and all that sort of stuff, it's just too far.
Can I just add 10 seconds? There is a possibility to convert these people. I know because I married a Republican who voted for Reagan, and she now runs Connecticut Progressive Facebook page with 18,000 people, mostly neoliberals to progressive, where she introduces them to a lot of articles from the World Socialist website, and she's a socialist, but she was a Reagan Republican. So there is possibility to make this.
I'm out, I guess.
You've been outed.
Last one in the back.
Without trying to launch too deeply into the issue of political theory, I think that one of the things that probably just about everybody in the United States, every working person in the United States agrees about, whether they know it or not, which is that the system we live in right now doesn't work. People have a lot of different ideas about why it doesn't work and what doesn't work and what that means, but virtually everyone agrees that the system that we're no longer standing on solid ground, that the sands are shifting underneath us, and that dramatic change seems inevitable whether we control it or not. And I think that one of the things that, when I think about the problem of cross-endorsement, I'm probably, you know, more stringent on cross-endorsement than a lot of folks, but I'm not absolute. But my perspective is simply this, that because we're in this period of an enormous shift, there are going to be, for the foreseeable future, there are going to be people on both sides of any line that you can draw who are going to suddenly realize they don't belong there. And there are going to be, you know, leftists who suddenly realize that being an opportunist and like being a bureaucrat in the government is a really good thing. Or are going to end up like, you know, what's his name, who was a Trotskyist and then became the publisher of Reader's Digest, Max Eastman. But But there are also going to be a lot of people for the foreseeable future who are sometimes going to vote independent, and maybe for us, maybe not. And sometimes they're going to vote Democrat, and sometimes they're going to say, I have to vote, and I have to register Democrat to vote in the primaries, but I'm going to vote for you in the general election. There are going to be a lot of good politicians who want to do the right thing and sometimes don't know how, or sometimes are doing a pretty good job. And we're not going to want to run against those politicians, I don't think. I don't think that we get anything from that. But everyone is in a state of movement right now. And I think that looking at it from that point of view makes it a lot easier to say, hey, let's not have like kind of ridiculous hard and fast rules. Hard and fast rules may make us feel really good, but they actually tend not to be very transferable to a real world in which everything is changing. And I actually think that, you know, as much as I disfavor cross-endorsement in, you know, a great many circumstances, the plain fact of the matter is, in my imagination, in my imagination of like the revolutionary world of tomorrow, I know that there are people who are Democrats now who are holding various positions, local municipal positions, or even larger, who are still going to be there. They're still going to be in office because they're going to make the change. At some point, they're going to say, yeah, you know what, I'm for Medicare for all, or I'm for dismantling the military-industrial complex. And those people are still going to be around. The problem is really, the sectarians, by which I mean not any particular stripe, I mean all sectarians think this way, no matter how left or right they are, is the sectarians who believe that tomorrow the revolution is going to be conducted by a group of people who haven't arrived yet, who simply don't exist, and they're going to call them into being. And I think that's the fatal flaw that we make when we think in terms of this problem of, you know, well, what about the Democrats? We should be doing the best job that we can do to project the positions that we want, that we most ardently believe in, and then let's see if we can convince some of them.
You said something about risks. You know, should we take the risk of running the less than optimal candidate? And I think we have to look at the risks. I am a risk taker.
Yeah.
I do think there's 163 towns in Connecticut.
Yeah.
The bigger risk is running only 5 candidates in Connecticut, or we're the best in the country, we're running 30. But there are 163 towns. We should be running at least 163 candidates.
169.
Okay.
How many?
169.
Oh, we're up to 169, okay.
I have totally Bye-bye, so I want to thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for, you guys really have a wonderful thing on here. I treasure it because not that Massachusetts is doing well in its own right, but it's true. What you guys have going here, it's something for other states, particularly Massachusetts, to aspire for. So treasure it and continue to grow it. We're going to give you a list of persons. Okay, excellent.
Yes.
I'd like to, if we get your name on that list. And so thank you very much for, I wanted to say something when he outed you. Don't feel bad. Briefly about myself, I grew up in India in a boarding school, and I was taught all kinds of things. So my teachers, they were all Indian schoolmasters, and I was only African American, the only American in the school. So when it came time for my history lesson, I was set aside for 5 minutes, or for 15 minutes outside the larger class. And this old Indian gentleman from British Times was saying, Maha Visnu, there are 2 parties in America. One is Democrat, one is Republican. Republicans, Abraham Lincoln, he freed the slaves. That's your party. And that's how I was introduced to American politics. So I grew up living in India until I was 26, thinking the Republicans. So then I left the United States. I was living in Europe for a time, and I was saying, the Republicans. I really started to pay attention in 2000, and I heard George Bush's compassionate conservatism. And so I was like, yes, compassionate compassion. I finally moved back to the United States in 2002, and reality set in. But it took me some time to come to the Green Party. I came to the Green Party quite by accident. I was running a Hindu temple in Boston, and I was looking for a hot water heater, and I wanted one that was environmentally friendly. So I Googled green hot water heater, And the Massachusetts Green Party came. That, I kid you not, and that was my introduction to the Green Party. So we often come a long way around, but oftentimes the core of who we are is in the right place. We just have to sometimes get on the right boat to manifest that. Thank you. I must get going. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.